Caesar versus Pompey, crossing the Rubicon, how one man changed the world. Rome was not built in a day, but it sure looked like it could collapse in one. The year is 49 BC. The Roman Republic, once the envy of the ancient world, is now a political pressure cooker with the lid rattling and steam hissing. Senators are scheming, generals are marching, and one man, Julius Caesar, is about to roll the dice that will change history forever. But how did it come to this? How did a republic that lasted nearly 450 years end up in a street brawl between gladiators and grain merchants? Why did Caesar, a man with divine authority and a mountain of debt, become the most dangerous politician in Rome? What drove Pompey the Great, Rome's golden boy, to abandon the city he once saved? And who were the shadowy figures behind the scenes? Cato the Younger, the moral buzzkill, Curio and Mark Antony, the veto-wielding Avengers, and Ahenobarbus, the escape artist with more lives than a Roman cat? From the back alleys of Rome to the windswept hills of Spain, from naval battles with grappling hooks to siege towers that scraped the sky, this is not just a war. It's a political thriller, a military masterclass, and a human drama of ambition, betrayal, and survival. So grab your scrolls, sharpen your gladi, and prepare to witness the unraveling of a republic. One battle, one betrayal, one bold move at a time. Because when Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he didn't just start a war. He started a story that would echo through history. Rome in the 1st century BC was like a celebrity reality show gone off the rails. The Republic had lasted nearly 450 years, but by now it was wheezing like a gladiator with asthma. The Gracchi brothers tried to fix things with land reform, so naturally they were assassinated. That set the tone. Reformers got stabbed, and the Senate got increasingly twitchy. Then came Sulla and Marius, the original frenemies. Marius, champion of the people, populares, and Sulla, defender of the aristocracy, optimates, turned political disagreement into full-blown civil war. Sulla won, marched on Rome twice, and became dictator. He even wrote laws to prevent future dictators, like a pyromaniac installing smoke detectors. But the damage was done. The message was clear. If you had an army and a grudge, Rome was yours for the taking. Fast forward to 59 BC. The Republic was now run by 3 men who couldn't agree on lunch, let alone governance. Crassus, richer than Croesus with a personality as warm as a tax audit. Pompey, Rome's golden boy general, fresh off victories in the East and a fan club of veterans. Caesar, young, charming, deep in debt, and already wearing the Pontifex Maximus hat like it was a crown. Together, they formed the first triumvirate, a political alliance so unofficial it made backroom deals look like constitutional amendments. Crassus paid the bribes, Pompey brought the muscle, and Caesar wooed the masses. Caesar even married off his daughter Julia to Pompey to seal the deal. Spoiler, she dies in childbirth, and so does the bromance. Caesar became consul in 59 BC and immediately started passing laws like he was speed-running a legislative video game. Land for veterans? Check. Ratification of Pompey's conquests? Done. The Senate tried to sideline him with a job overseeing pastures. Caesar responded by getting governorship of Gaul and Illyria, with 4 legions and a 5-year term. That's like being told to manage a petting zoo and ending up with command of a tank division. Meanwhile, Rome itself was turning into a political thunderdome. Enter Clodius Pulcher, a patrician turned plebe who weaponized populism and street violence. He created gangs to beat up opponents, forced Cicero into exile, and even tried to assassinate Pompey. Pompey responded by backing Milo, who formed his own gang. Rome became a battleground of thugs, gladiators, and daggers hidden in tunics. In 56 BC, Pompey and Crassus extended Caesar's governorship by another 5 years. Caesar, now in Gaul, was busy conquering tribes, writing commentaries, and building a fan base of loyal, battle-hardened soldiers. Crassus, not to be outdone, went east to fight the Parthians and promptly got himself killed at Carrhae, along with his army and his dignity. Then Clodius was murdered by Milo. His supporters burned his body in the Senate house, which also burned down. Rome was literally on fire. The Senate, in full panic mode, made Pompey sole consul in 52 BC. He restored order with soldiers, trials, and executions. The Optimates loved him. Caesar? Not so much. With Crassus dead and Clodius gone, the triumvirate was toast. Pompey and Caesar were now the 2 biggest players in Rome, and they were on a collision course. Caesar had 10 legions, personal loyalty from his troops, and the kind of popularity that made the Senate break out in hives. Pompey, now aligned with the Optimates, saw Caesar as a threat. The Senate, led by Cato the Younger, began plotting to strip Caesar of his power. Caesar, still in Gaul, applied to run for consul in absentia for 48 BC. If he won, he'd keep his legal immunity and could pass laws to protect himself. The Senate said no. Caesar said, "Oh, really?" By 49 BC, Caesar's term as governor was ending. The Senate demanded he disband his army and return to Rome. Caesar knew that walking into Rome without his legions was political suicide. So instead, he crossed the Rubicon River with his army, a move so bold it became a metaphor for irreversible decisions. He allegedly said, "Alea Iacta est," the die is cast. And just like that, the Republic was at war with itself. Let's be honest, Julius Caesar wasn't exactly playing by the rules. As consul, he stirred up political violence like a chef whipping up a spicy stew. He bullied his fellow consul, passed laws with Pompey's muscle and Crassus's money, and then waltzed off to Gaul, where he started wars that the Senate hadn't authorized. Britain? Gaul? He was basically on a conquest world tour. But here's the kicker. He was popular. Like, dangerously popular. The kind of popular that made senators clutch their scrolls and whisper, "We need a plan." Enter Cato the Younger. A man so principled, he made Stoics look like party animals. Cato hated Caesar with the fiery passion of 1,000 burning scrolls. He ran for consul in 52 BC with one goal: strip Caesar of his command and drag him into court faster than you can say Veni Vidi Vici. He lost. Caesar's governorship continued, and the Senate's frustration grew. They couldn't beat him in battle, and they couldn't beat him in elections. So they tried bureaucracy. The Senate, led by Cato, insisted Caesar's term ended in 50 BC. Caesar, ever the legal ninja, pointed out that Pompey and Crassus had passed a law extending it to the end of 49 BC. Cue the Roman equivalent of "I object," shouted across the forum. Caesar had his own Avengers, Curio and Mark Antony, tribunes of the plebs and professional veto machines. Every time the Senate tried to strip Caesar of his command, they vetoed it, like they were swiping left on bad legislation. The Senate was stuck. Caesar was still technically legal, but they knew the moment he became a private citizen, he'd be vulnerable, and Cato was already sharpening his legal daggers. In December 50 BC, Caesar moved one legion to Ravenna, a cozy little town just outside Italy proper. Was he wintering? Was he threatening? Nobody knew. Rumors flew that he had 4 legions, not one. The Senate panicked like a toga party caught by the fire brigade. Pompey offered a deal. "I'll resign if Caesar does first." Caesar replied, "You first." It was the ancient Roman version of, "You hang up first." Neither budged. Caesar then offered a compromise. He'd give up most of his provinces and legions, but keep Illyricum and 2 legions until the end of 49 BC. Cicero, ever the diplomat, negotiated him down to 1 legion and 1 province. Pompey was ready to accept, but then came the hardliners, Cato and Consul Lentulus, who said, "Negotiation? With Caesar? Over my dead toga." They torpedoed the deal. On January 7, 49 BC, the Senate passed the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, the Roman equivalent of DEFCON 1. It suspended all laws, gave emergency powers to the consuls, and declared Caesar an enemy of the state. Lentulus and Marcellus handed all their powers to Pompey, who now held the fate of the Republic in his hands. That night, Caesar's allies, Mark Antony, Curio, and others, fled Rome to join him in Ravenna. The stage was set. The curtain was rising. The Republic was about to get a front-row seat to its own destruction. On January 10, 49 BC, Caesar stood at the Rubicon, the river that marked the boundary of Italy. Crossing it with an army was illegal. It was a declaration of war. Caesar hesitated. He knew what civil war meant. His own family had suffered under Sulla. But he also knew that surrender meant exile or execution. After a long day of deliberation, he uttered the immortal words, "Alea Iacta est," the die is cast. And with that, the great Roman Civil War began. Caesar moved fast, like really fast. He seized key cities in northern Italy in days. There was barely any resistance. Many towns welcomed him. Others had no troops. Pompey, caught off guard, hesitated. He had 2 legions nearby, the 1st, loyal, and the 15th, iffy. His best legions were in Spain and the East. Pompey had 3 choices: defend Rome, fight in Italy, abandon the peninsula. He chose option 3. Pompey fled south, taking the Senate and the consuls with him. Plutarch said Romans considered wherever Pompey went as Rome. Cassius Dio said many Romans considered it a betrayal. Either way, Pompey left the city and the treasury undefended. Caesar didn't even bother with Rome. He had bigger fish to fry. He wanted Pompey. He wanted Italy. He wanted momentum. But not everything went Caesar's way. His trusted lieutenant Labienus, still in Gaul, defected to Pompey. That stung. Labienus knew Caesar's tactics. He was a formidable general. But Caesar's legions remained loyal. The 8th and 12th were already marching south. By the time Caesar reached Corfinium, he had 3 legions at his back. The 8th, 12th, and his original 13th. These weren't fresh recruits. They were hardened veterans who'd spent years turning Gaul into Caesar's personal trophy case. Facing this trio was Ahenobarbus, a man with a name that sounds like a cocktail and a force of Pompeian levies who, upon seeing Caesar's army, suddenly remembered they had other plans that day. The levies begged Ahenobarbus to surrender. He did, reluctantly, like a man handing over the last slice of pizza. Caesar, ever the magnanimous warlord, pardoned Ahenobarbus and let the levies live. But he didn't just let them go, he recruited them. They became the 15th, 16th, and 17th legions, swelling Caesar's ranks and shrinking Pompey's without a single sword swing. Ahenobarbus naturally took Caesar's kindness and ran straight back to Pompey, because loyalty in Roman politics was about as stable as a chariot on cobblestones. Pompey, realizing Caesar was steamrolling Italy like a man late for dinner, abandoned his plan to fight in the south and headed to Brundisium, the Roman equivalent of a ferry terminal. His plan? Cross the Adriatic, regroup in Greece, and summon every client king, mercenary, and distant cousin with a sword. Caesar, smelling blood and opportunity, chased Pompey like a lion after a limping gazelle. He sent envoys offering peace, on the condition that Pompey resign first. Pompey declined, citing legal authority and a healthy dose of, "I'm not falling for that." By early March, Caesar arrived at Brundisium with 6 legions. Pompey had already shipped half his army across the Adriatic. Caesar began building a breakwater to trap Pompey's fleet. Pompey responded by turning merchant ships into floating fortresses with towers that rained missiles on Caesar's engineers. It was like a naval version of whack-a-mole. Despite Caesar's efforts, Pompey escaped under cover of night. The war would not end in Italy. It would go global. Caesar entered Rome like a rock star on a comeback tour. He convened what was left of the Senate, declared Pompey an enemy of the state, and, because war is expensive, plundered the treasury and temples. With gold in hand, he equipped his new legions and ordered ships to be built across loyal provinces. But ships take time. Caesar couldn't afford to sit around sipping wine. He needed to secure his western flank. Spain was crawling with Pompeian legions, and Caesar knew they were an army without a leader. Time to fix that. Caesar sent Valerius with the 16th Legion to Sardinia, and Curio with the 15th and 17th to Sicily. Sardinia's governor, Cato, had no army and even less courage. The moment Valerius approached, the citizens of Corollis booted Cato out like a bad tenant. He fled to Africa. Cato the Younger, holding Sicily, tried to raise levies but had no legions. Facing 2 of Caesar's, he wisely chose to abandon the island and join Pompey in Greece. Caesar's men took the islands without breaking a sweat and began prepping for an invasion of Africa. Caesar, after a brief Roman pit stop, grabbed the 18th and 19th legions and marched to Spain, leaving Mark Antony in charge of Rome with the 8th, 12th, and 13th. The 20th was on standby to support Curio in Africa. But first, Caesar had to deal with Massilia, modern Marseille, a city that had decided neutrality was the best way to stall Caesar while secretly prepping for war. They closed their gates, called in local tribes, and waited for Ahenobarbus to arrive. When he did, Massilia dropped the pretense and started attacking Caesar's supply ships. Caesar, not one to waste time on sieges, left Trebonius with 3 legions to handle the city, and Decimus Brutus with 12 ships to blockade the harbor. Caesar himself rode off with 900 cavalry like a man late for a duel. Meanwhile, Fabius, another of Caesar's legates, had already crossed the Pyrenees with 3 legions and secured the mountain passes. Reinforcements soon joined him. 3 more legions, auxiliaries, and cavalry. Caesar's Spanish force now numbered 30,000 legionaries, 5,000 auxiliaries, and 6,000 cavalry, all veterans of the Gallic Wars and all ready to tango. Pompey's Spanish forces were no joke. Left in the hands of Afranius and Petreius, two grizzled veterans of Iberian warfare, they commanded 27,500 legionaries, 8,000 auxiliaries, and 10,000 cavalry. They camped near Ilerda on high ground west of the river Sicoris, guarding a crucial stone bridge. Fabius, seeing the bridge was a death trap, built two new wooden bridges 6 kilometers apart and camped on the western bank. But the Pompeians had stripped the land of supplies, forcing Fabius to send foraging parties across the river. It all began with a storm. Not a metaphorical storm of politics or ambition, no, a literal, bridge-smashing tempest that turned Caesar's Spanish campaign into a logistical nightmare. Fabius, Caesar's loyal legate, had sent 2 legions across the river to forage, with cavalry support scheduled to follow. But the storm had other plans. It smashed the nearest bridge like a toddler with a toy, leaving the cavalry stranded on one side and the legions exposed on the other. Enter Afranius, stage left, twirling his villainous mustache, figuratively. He saw the opportunity and pounced like a cat on a mouse. 4 legions and all his cavalry thundered across the stone bridge, aiming to crush Caesar's isolated troops. But Caesar's men weren't amateurs. They formed a defensive square on high ground, shielding the foragers in the center like a Roman version of Capture the VIP. Outnumbered and surrounded, they held firm, waiting for the inevitable doom. Then, cue dramatic music, Fabius sent reinforcements across the second bridge, 6 kilometers away. The Pompeians, realizing they'd walked into a trap, retreated. The Caesarians limped back to camp bruised but breathing. Casualties? Likely heavy. Morale? Shaken. But the campaign wasn't over. A few days later, Caesar himself arrived, fresh from Rome and ready to turn the tide. He took command, repaired the broken bridge, and marched his legions closer to Ilerda, daring Afranius to come down from his comfy high ground and fight like a man. Afranius, being no fool, refused. So Caesar pulled a classic move. He deployed his legions in 3 lines, 2 as a screen, while the third dug trenches for a fortified camp. It was like building a castle under enemy fire. Bold, brilliant, and very Caesar. Afranius tried to harass the workers, but Caesar's defensive line held firm. Soon, Caesar had a shiny new camp and even brought over the baggage and 500 men from the old Fabian camp. Things were looking up. Then Caesar spotted a mound between Afranius's camp and Ilerda. His eyes lit up. If I take that, he thought, I cut off their supplies. Easy win. So he sent the 14th Legion to seize it. But Afranius was faster. His men reached the top first, and with gravity on their side, they sent the 14th Legion tumbling back like a bad soufflé. Caesar's right flank began to buckle. He sent in the 9th Legion to stabilize things, and they managed to push the Pompeians back, temporarily. The 9th, thinking they'd won, chased the enemy up the slope of Ilerda. Big mistake. The narrow terrain turned them into sitting ducks, and Pompeian missiles rained down like angry bees. Reinforcements poured in from both sides. The battle raged for 5 hours. Finally, Caesar ordered a full infantry charge, gained the crest, and used his cavalry to cover the retreat. Casualties? Caesar claimed 70 dead and 600 wounded. Reality check, it was probably worse. He failed to take the mound, and the Pompeians fortified it. Caesar had underestimated his fellow Romans, and paid the price. As if things weren't bad enough, another storm hit. The river flooded, destroying both bridges. Caesar was now stuck, cut off from his supply line, and watching his food stores dwindle like cookies in a teenager's room. Afranius, meanwhile, was living the good life. Plenty of supplies, control of the bridge, and a smug grin. He sent 3 legions to intercept Caesar's reinforcements from Gaul, killing 200 and forcing the rest to camp on high ground. Caesar was in trouble. Deep trouble. He needed a miracle, or at least a clever workaround. So Caesar did what Caesar does best. He improvised. He ordered the construction of lightweight boats made of timber and animal hides, like something out of a Roman survival show. At night, he sent a detachment 34 kilometers upriver, crossed it, and fortified a hill on the eastern bank. From there, they built a bridge back toward Caesar's camp. Within days, the bridge was complete. Supplies flowed, reinforcements arrived. Caesar was back in business. With his Gallic cavalry now in play, Caesar began harassing Pompeian foragers, flipping the script and regaining control. While Caesar was wrestling with rivers and Romans in Spain, the siege of Massilia was heating up. Ahenobarbus, the man who never met a betrayal he didn't like, had built up a fleet of 17 warships and several smaller vessels manned by archers. Brutus, Caesar's naval commander, had only 12 ships, but they were packed with elite fighters. The Massilian ships were lighter and more agile, like sports cars. Brutus' ships were heavier, like armored trucks. But in a fight, muscle often beats maneuverability. Ahenobarbus sailed out, hoping to break the blockade and bring supplies into the city. What followed was a naval clash worthy of Homeric poetry. Arrows flying, ships ramming, men shouting in Latin and probably swearing in Gallic. Ahenobarbus, ever the opportunist, had cobbled together a fleet of 17 warships and a handful of archer boats. His crew? Mostly farmers, local Massilians, and a few allied archers who probably thought they were signing up for a fishing trip. Meanwhile, Brutus, Caesar's naval commander and future backstabber, had just 12 ships, but they were crewed by volunteer legionaries. These were men who'd fought in Gaul, survived ambushes, and probably wrestled bears for fun. The Massilians tried to play it smart, darting around Brutus's ships, peppering them with arrows, smashing oars, and generally being annoying. But when they got too close, the legionaries threw grappling hooks, like they were auditioning for a Roman version of WWE. They pulled the ships in, boarded them, and turned the decks into blood-soaked arenas. Some legionaries even boarded 2 ships at once, like action heroes in sandals. Caesar, ever the PR master, praised the bravery of the Massilians, but let's be honest, they were outmatched. More than half their fleet was sunk or captured, and the survivors limped back to port. The blockade held, and Brutus went back to sharpening his knives, figuratively and literally. Back in Spain, Caesar's luck was turning. With the new bridge completed, his Gallic cavalry, fast, fierce, and probably fluent in trash talk, began harassing Pompeian foragers so effectively that Afranius's men had to forage at night. That's right, Roman soldiers sneaking around like raccoons. Local tribes, seeing Caesar's momentum, began pledging allegiance and sending grain. Caesar, never one to miss a tactical opportunity, started building ditches to divert the river Sicoris, creating a ford near his camp. This would allow his men to cross easily and choke off Pompeian supplies entirely. Afranius, realizing he was about to be starved into a footnote, planned a tactical retreat to further Spain, where Varro had 2 legions waiting. He ordered a pontoon bridge built 30 miles south on the river Ebro and began shifting troops across the stone bridge to prepare for evacuation. Caesar, smelling blood and glory, sprang into action. He sent his cavalry to harass the retreating Pompeians, slowing them down like a swarm of angry bees. The ford wasn't finished, so Caesar ordered pack animals into the river to slow the current. Yes, donkeys became tactical assets. He marched 5 legions across the river, leaving 1 to guard the camp, and raced south. By mid-afternoon, Caesar had caught up. Both armies camped on the eastern bank, just shy of the mountain passes that led to the Ebro. Whoever controlled those passes would control the war. A tense standoff ensued. Afranius considered a night march, but Caesar's cavalry patrolled like Roman ninjas. Night battles were risky, so Afranius opted for a fighting retreat the next day. Caesar, ever the strategist, faked a withdrawal to Ilerda at dawn, then pivoted and marched hard for the mountains. Afranius panicked and broke camp, racing for the passes. But Caesar's cavalry harassed them relentlessly, and despite the tougher terrain, Caesar reached the passes first. Afranius tried sending light troops to seize the high ground, but they were surrounded and cut down. With his escape blocked, Afranius camped on a small hill and began contemplating his life choices. Caesar, now in control, didn't attack. He fortified his position and waited. Afranius was running out of food and water. Retreating to Ilerda meant walking into a pincer trap. Staying meant starvation. Afranius built a rampart to the river for water, and something unexpected happened. Peace broke out. Soldiers from both sides met at the river, chatted about family, politics, and probably who had the better sandals. Old friends reunited. Some Pompeians even visited Caesar's camp. Caesar claimed this was thanks to his leniency, but let's be real. Afranius's men were tired, hungry, and losing the will to fight. Afranius did nothing to stop the fraternization. But Petreius, the grizzled co-commander, was having none of it. He demanded oaths of loyalty, banned contact with Caesar's men, and ordered any Caesarian found in camp to be executed. The brief peace shattered. The soldiers returned to their camps, and the war resumed. Petreius tried to retreat to Ilerda. Caesar's cavalry harassed them every step. On the third day, the Pompeians were forced to camp on unfavorable terrain. Caesar saw his moment and began building earthworks around their camp, a tactic he'd perfected at Alesia. The Pompeians were now surrounded, cut off from water, food, and hope. After days of harassment and thirst, they sued for peace. Caesar, ever the magnanimous victor, promised leniency. Afranius, Petreius, and their officers surrendered. The army was disbanded, and Caesar sent 4 legions, the 6th, 9th, 11th, and 14th, to escort them to safety. Caesar, meanwhile, took the 10th and 7th legions and marched into further Spain to confront Varro, who had raised 2 more legions, giving him a total of 4. Varro had been optimistic after early reports of Afranius' success. That optimism was about to meet Caesar's reality. When Varro heard of Caesar's victory at Ilerda, he did what any self-respecting Roman general would do. He panicked. He marched 2 legions to Gades, hoping to hold out and prolong the war. But the locals had already read the tea leaves, or perhaps the entrails of a sacrificial goat, and decided Caesar was the winning horse. The chiefs of local tribes met Caesar at Corduba, pledged allegiance, and the chief of Gades slammed the city gates in Varro's face like a Roman bouncer saying, "Not tonight, general." Then came the cherry on top. One of Varro's own legions mutinied, striking their colors like a toddler flipping the game board. With no army, no allies, and no options, Varro sent word to Caesar, "I surrender. Please don't make me share a tent with Petreius." Caesar, ever the magnanimous victor, appointed Quintus Cassius Longinus as governor of Spain and absorbed Varro's 4 legions into his own ranks, renaming them the 21st through 24th legions. In just a few months, Caesar had disbanded or absorbed Pompey's entire Spanish army. Not bad for a man who started with 1 legion and a dream. Meanwhile, the siege of Massilia was still grinding on like a Roman soap opera. Trebonius had built trenches, towers, and walls to block off the peninsula. Brutus maintained the naval blockade. Together, they had the city surrounded like a toga at a Senate meeting. But Massilia wasn't going down without a fight. The city's high walls, ballistae, and strategic position made it a fortress. Trebonius built a siege ramp and battering ram, but Massilian sorties and missile fire slowed progress. The Massilians even rebuilt their fleet to 17 ships, though most were refitted merchant vessels crewed by archers. Then came a twist. Pompey sent reinforcements, 16 ships under Lucius Nasidius, some equipped with bronze rams. A small vessel slipped past Brutus' blockade to alert the Massilians, and Ahenobarbus, ever the opportunist, seized the moment. The Massilian fleet sailed out, met Nasidius at Torois, and prepared for battle. Brutus, now commanding 18 ships, thanks to captured vessels, was outnumbered nearly 2-1. But he had one thing the enemy didn't: legionaries who treated naval combat like a bar brawl with swords. Brutus focused his attack on the Massilian ships, knowing they preferred missile combat. The Massilians tried their usual tricks, darting around, peppering with arrows, smashing oars. But once they got too close, Brutus' men threw grappling hooks, boarded the ships, and turned the decks into blood-soaked arenas. In a dramatic moment, 2 Massilian ships tried to ram Brutus' flagship in a pincer move. But Brutus, channeling his inner gladiator, darted forward, causing the 2 ships to collide head-on. His fleet pounced, sinking both. Seeing the carnage, Nasidius fled, taking his fleet with him. Caesar called it cowardice. Nasidius probably called it strategic retreat. Either way, he didn't lose a man, because he didn't fight. Brutus won the battle without losing a single ship, while the Massilians lost 9, 5 sunk, 4 captured. Their fleet limped back to port, never to emerge again. With the sea secured, Trebonius turned to land. He built a 6-story siege tower, 9 meters wide, with 2-meter-thick walls of brick and clay. It had shooting platforms, ballistae, and a 20-meter gallery, a massive covered sledge with a sloped roof to resist fire. The gallery was pushed forward to the base of a Massilian tower. Under its protection, Roman engineers began undermining the wall, crowbar by crowbar. The Massilians tried to stop them with rocks and pitch, but the Roman defenses held. As the wall began to tilt, the Massilians requested a truce, asking to negotiate with Caesar personally. Trebonius, ever cautious, agreed. The Romans pulled back. Then came the betrayal.